Hi everyone. A slightly different opening to Rugby Unity this week. And the reason being is that, as you know, Eddie Jones is in the United States on the road, coaching the Japanese team ahead of this weekend's final of the Pacific Nations Cup in Salt Lake City, Utah. Now, we recorded this program late at night and we have had some difficulties recording Eddie's audio and then retrieving the audio. So today's program is not at our usual standard, and I do apologise for that. But sometimes stuff like this happens. But it's a great conversation. We really covered some ground. We went all around the world today, and I do hope you enjoy today's episode of Rugby Unity. But again, just in advance, it's a little bit ropey as a listen, but still, I do hope it is worth your time. This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and a big thanks once again to the third voice participating as strongly as you are in the making of this program. Craig C. says, love the show, guys. The knowledge in that room is at the top. As an Englishman, please pass on my regards to Eddie for what he achieved with our national team. There we go, all the way from England. Sibanola Diamani says, I've been waiting for this episode. This has become my favourite rugby podcast. I'm keen on hearing what these two brilliant rugby minds thought of the matches at the weekend. And Tertullian says, David, Ewen and Eddie, great show, gents. I'm learning so much from your technical insights. I love the broad international focus, like what is happening in the women's game and how the game is tracking amongst second-tier men's teams. So please keep it up. So there we go. Thank you very much for those comments, and please keep them coming. And just before we jump into the program, on YouTube, there is a new feature called Hype Points, and you'll see it there. And many of you are saying lots of lovely things, which is great. But if you could jump on and find the hype points and just give it a couple of nudges, couple of points along to give us a few more hype points, what that does is help us to be found by more people. So jump onto YouTube, jump onto the hype points and fire away. And please, that would help us to be found. So anyway, the Rugby Championship obviously is gone to sleep for this weekend, but there is still so much rugby to be played around the world, and certainly looking forward to talking to Eddie Jones about his preparation for the Pacific Nations Cup final between Japan and Fiji. But before we talk about the Pacific Nations Cup, all eyes of the rugby world turn to England and the semi-finals of the Women's Rugby World Cup, the tournament that really has captured the imagination of the rugby world, where we have seen massive improvement in the standard of rugby played by women. We've seen great contests, but we now see the four best teams in the world. New Zealand, 6-time champions, against the number 2 ranked Canada. And then France will take on the favourites England. Both matches will be played at Ashton Gate in Bristol. It will be cold. It will be wet. So Ewen McKenzie, you have both as a player and as a coach been involved in the preparations of teams around semi-final times in World Cups. Take us into those weeks. Take us into that preparation and the mindset that the teams and the coaches will be applying as they head towards, hopefully, if successful, the final in Twickenham the following weekend.
Well, it's a different phase of the tournament. You play, obviously, early in the tournament, you're playing in pools, and so you can absorb a loss or something like that sometimes, but in this situation here, all the seeds have come through and you're into sudden death, right? So then it's all about what's the primary motivation? It's just you just got to win the game. And so the confusing part here is that all of these teams have come through with pretty comfortable margins the whole way. They haven't been stressed too much on the scoreboard, so we haven't seen the impact of scoreboard pressure, generally speaking, in these games, probably one of them last week. But other than that, they've been pretty one-sided scoreboard. So that means you haven't been tested mentally. You've been tested maybe skill-wise and whatever, but mentally there's that pressure that comes to bear, because if you get it wrong, you make a mistake, you do something silly, you get a yellow card, whatever, all of those things can have an impact on the result. And so that's what you carry into the week. In terms of the preparation, you would have done a lot of work, and one of the advantages of playing some of the games, they've probably been able to try a lot of things, because some of the games have been a bit one-sided, so they've been able to try a lot of technical things on the field. So they've got an armory of a grab bag of things that they can pull out on the day, which they know might work, but they haven't been under the pressure. A lot of these teams haven't been under the pressure yet, where you've got a team that's equally as competitive. So that's the fascinating part about this weekend. You've got all of that mental pressure that's going to come in. So the training week's going to be what it'll be. I don't think it'll be anything different. It'll probably be slightly lighter, if anything, because you're getting to the end of the tournament. But the mental side of the mental pressure will come to bear, and that'll obviously be more on England than anyone, basically because of the nature of being there with local fans and the like. So I'll be interested to see how it's going to pan out, because we've got just a different mental scenario compared with the previous weeks, where they probably knew that they were going to win. Now you've got a situation where you've got the pressure of, well, what if we get it wrong? And that's that what if thing. So you've got to try and keep that out of the week. Don't allow that to sort of creep into the thinking and whatever. And so selection's obviously important. But you've got to get everything right this week. You can probably get away with making a few mistakes, or a bad scrum, or a bad line out, whatever, in previous games. This week you can't, and there's no second chances. So that's it. It's a matter of dealing with that and making sure that that people don't drift and don't get distracted. As the tournament gets on, these things they're long, right? So you're away and you're in hotels for a long period of time. So the food, everything becomes can get a bit monotonous, so you've got to be looking for things to maybe change up without distracting from the course. So you're looking to freshen up a little bit, get your tactics right, but also make sure the mental side of it's right. And I'll go back to a game that the semi-final in '91 we played New Zealand, right? And so we went to the '91 World Cup. I don't think we were favourites at any point, but that was probably our best training week. And we were fizzing in the training weekend. The way we trained, we had punch-ups in training. We had all sorts of things going on. The tension was there. And we went out and we sort of exploded on the field, and we played probably our best game against the All Blacks, for a long time. So and we had a great result and beat them. So I think
I still rate that first half as quite possibly the best half of football ever played.
It was a bit like watching
by a Wallabies team.
It felt like when I was watching South Africa in that first test at Ellis Park against Australia, that first 20 minutes. That's what it felt like, where everything, all the passes were sticking, and people were cleaning, smashing people in the clean out. That's what it was like. But that was the preparation had. It had, as I said, it had punch-ups. There were people who were obviously in the team. There was some selection disappointment. All of that stuff goes into it, because you get to the big games and you start working out that some people aren't going to make the big stage. They're not going to be in the 23 or whatever. So there's a lot there to manage from a coaching point of view. But the mental side for me is the biggest part, because you've suddenly got the what if we don't get it right on the night, or what if the scrum doesn't perform or something like that, or what if someone gets sent off, how does that mean? And your thing's over. And I remember being at the airport after we beat New Zealand. I remember being at the airport. The playoff was in Cardiff, and we were at the airport, and the All Blacks were at the airport too, and they were flying to Cardiff, and we were flying to London to Twickenham, and it's sort of it's those moments there where you're sort of like, not so much on the field, but the next day, that moment there, they were going off to play the who cares fixture, the who finished third in the tournament.
The perennial. There's another one of those next week as well.
I know. So you've got all of that. So and you're dreading that thing. That could have been us getting on that plane heading to Cardiff. So it's that final, and it's that over. Like if you don't make the quarters and the semi-finals, generally speaking, they ship you out of there. The quarter final, they can ship you out of there, so you don't even get to see the final. Like you can be like so you're just gone. That's it. They cut they would cut their losses financially and see you later. So it's that finite. And I remember in the quarter final when we played Ireland, thinking we were behind on the scoreboard with a couple of minutes to go, and I'm thinking, I haven't even packed my suitcase. It looks like we're going home. So, but we managed to beat Ireland. They're the thoughts you're having behind the goal. I'm not even packed.
Yeah,
but you're not packed. Like you're not even ready to go. So, the mental part's a really big part of the tournament, and that kicks in right now. Yeah.
So, Eddie Jones, you've been around World Cup semi-finals, successful World Cup semi-finals, unsuccessful World Cup semi-finals. Ewen McKenzie makes the point, and you have made this point over and over and over many years in terms of preparation during the week is a very, very good indicator of performance onto the field. How do you manage that preparation? How do you think about going into managing the pressures of the week as, the New Zealand, Canadian, French and England teams will be dealing with this week as they get ready for these big matches at the weekend?
Well, you've done all your hard work in the early part of the tournament. The physical work, you've got yourself right, you've got yourself physically fit, you got your base game right. And then depending on your group of players, some teams need to do a little bit of hard training and other teams just need lighter runs. The longer you've been together, the more cohesion you've got. The less physically intense training you need to do as a general rule, not as a absolute. I can remember at the end of the time with the Brumbies after 4 years where we had that team together with Ewen. We were able in the finals we were able to train quite lightly because we were prepared and ready to go, and the players had a cohesion about them. And if you look at these four teams in the women's semi-final, New Zealand obviously did pretty well at the last World Cup. They won it, didn't they?
They did. Yeah.
So they've
right at the death.
So they got that winning experience. They've probably been a little bit up and down since then, but they've got a core of players that understand how to win a World Cup. So, that puts them in a pretty good position. Canada, has probably been one of the form teams over the last 4 years. They've been doing really well. Punching above their weight, and will have that, we want to win respect type attitude, because Canada rugby, as we've spoken about in the early 90s, particularly in the men's game, was one of the stronger teams in the world, close to a top 8 team. Consistently, they've fallen away, and the women's team have brought Canada back into the rugby sort of major stage. So, I reckon, they would have been at it this week. They would have been probably training a little bit harder. They need that feeling that they're doing the work and they're prepared for the game. And the second game, France versus England. France never needs any motivation to play against England. That's an understatement. So the French in the women's game have been a late bloomer. So the case should be trying to balance their nerves. But again, they're not expected to win. So they've got to do a free hit. Whereas England, the pressure's all on them. Home game, home semi-final, being expected to win a World Cup. A bit like New Zealand were, pre-2011. The expectations all there, but they haven't been able to deliver at the final stage. And, John Mitchell's a massively experienced coach and would be using every bit of the years of his experience to try to get the right balance between, we're confident, we're right to go, but let's make sure we do all the simple things well.
Pemby, there's a lot that goes on in these World Cups. Like you've got, it's the final composition. These final four were probably a bit more expected. But for example, when you get surprise teams that make quarters and semis, there's a whole lot of things that go on in the background, in the team environment. You've suddenly got teams that get a step further than was expected, so then they've got to deal with it. Like I'll give you an example: ticketing, right? The tickets aren't just available. You've got to have a transfer of tickets from not only the team but also from the fan base because another team didn't make it. So you have this sort of massive flow of things going on where every friend of a friend of a friend is ringing saying, can you get me tickets? Because you're in, like for France, they're suddenly in a semi-final. All their friends will be saying, can you get me a ticket? Can you get, this is the distraction that happens in the week, that the players will be getting contacted by their mothers and sisters and whatever, and they'll want tickets. So you can't believe how much of that. I remember again in '91, Anthony Herbert, who wasn't playing this. He was designated. He was put in charge of ticketing because that's how much of it that went on. Once we made the final, there was a whole big swing of tickets where New Zealand didn't make it. And so there's all this massive transfer of tickets where the tour buses for New Zealand were heading to Cardiff and it's not going to Twickenham. So you got all these people, the tickets that were suddenly become available. And so, but you had to get them in the right people's hands. And to avoid the pressure on the team, we actually made one of the players in charge of that process to try and take that away from the people that might have actually been on the field. So there's a lot of and for England, being the home team, there'll be a lot of people around trying to get people to go to lunches and things like that and come and talk about the experience and whatever, even though it's not complete. You can see all the corporate and commercial stuff ramping up in the background for England in particular, and that's something they've got to deal with. And Mitchell will be great at handling that, but it's still there. And the team manager, he'll be besieged by people wanting signed jerseys. Like you won't believe how many signed jerseys. Every time you walk into the team room, there's another 50 jerseys to sign. And for the teams that are there from away, there'll be messages of support all over the walls and stuff like printed off emails and things like that. So that's all good. That's all fun, but it's different. It's suddenly different, and you're sort of going, oh, what's going, it just feels different. So that's when that pressure permeates into the team group and into, not so much into training, but it can if you haven't been there before. New Zealand has that experience, as Eddie's already talked about, but Canada, France, it's all a bit new for them. England's under pressure anyway for being the home team.
Just to add to what Ewen's saying, the big change now, mate, the tickets is all QR codes. You got to be good at QR codes.
Yeah.
The old envelope writing the name of the person, it's all QR codes now. But the only thing that hasn't changed, I went down to dinner last night and there's 10 new jerseys down there. They've still got to sign the jerseys.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good about them. I'm glad about the tickets because the tickets are a nightmare. That's the biggest punish of all time. Is that people you've never met are ringing up, or friends of friends of friends, always thinking you got another 4 tickets, and it just becomes a drain. So I'm glad that sounds better. But the signing jerseys and signing anything else that moves, that's a punish.
Mate, it's not good if you're technologically challenged, mate, I tell you. It's still a pain in the you-know-what.
I can imagine.
So the tickets being one problem, what about the weather? Particularly New Zealand, Canada, they're teams that like to move the ball around. Ewen McKenzie, if you're looking towards the weekend, it's going to be wet. You're going to have to change and adapt. The teams so far have played in pretty good conditions. It was a bit wet last weekend in a couple of the matches, but prior to then, there'd been plenty of opportunity to move the ball around. How does that impact a semi-final? And particularly, as you both say, this is at the sharp end of the tournament. The only thing that matters now is winning.
Yeah, I think that as you say, they've already played in some of those conditions and they would have played in them many times before. So I think it's more from a fan point of view, the spectacle, hopefully doesn't become dour because of the weather. They'll play to win so that I'm sure they'll take points and generally speaking, be trying to get the scoreboard cranking as quickly as possible. But they have the skill set. Like you watch England, they've got the skill set to play in all conditions, so they'll just adapt. And New Zealand, same, Canada, same. They'll all be able to adapt to the conditions. It's just a question of what it looks like from the outside. You'd like to think it was going to be an open game. Everyone sort of dreams of that. But sometimes when you get to these sort of games, it does get a little bit tighter and a little bit simpler and not as expressive. But that's just the nature of what's on offer. So I think that if a team gets away like England, and maybe they get away from France, and so they can just keep playing. But I think it'll be a bit tighter than that. So I think that they'll favour that, and maybe it opens up towards the end. But I don't think the weather will change anything other than it being a little bit more pragmatic. And so from a fan point of view, not as expressive.
All right. Well, listen. Let's jump into some predictions here. First match: New Zealand, Canada. Then the second: France, England. Ewen, McKenzie. Who wins and why?
I'm going to go with New Zealand. I think they've got the experience. Eddie talked about it before. So I think that they've been and they've got that domestic pressure too of trying to live up to the standards of what's expected in New Zealand. I think Canada are definitely a good side. I think it'll be a tight game. I think New Zealand will get there just through sheer the experience. I think will probably be an edge. And then I think England have just seemed to me the best all-round team to me. They have all the relevant skills to be able to play, so they'll be okay for the occasion. And France, I think. I worry about France whether emotionally. We saw it last week with that biting incident. I worry about that they've got to manage their emotions in these games. It's a big one, and they might be a bit too desperate, and England will be methodical. So and that could you could get a reasonable score on there in England's favour, I think, in that game, and that sets up. I think England-New Zealand final is what I think.
All right. So Eddie Jones. Your views. Who's going to win and why?
Well, I agree with Link about England. I think they'll be fundamentally too sound, particularly if the conditions are wet, where the running and kicking skills become more important, good body position. And this is a tricky game for them. I think John Mitchell will understand, having had the experience of, if you go back to 2003, he had that terrible experience of getting beaten in the semi-final, where they had a red-hot team. We were lucky enough to be part of the team on the other side and beat them that day. But, there'd still be a scar at the back of his head, and he feels it every so often. And so he'd understand this is the game. Like, this is the game for them. They win this, they'll win the cup, I reckon. And it's obvious if they don't win it, they don't win the cup. But he'll be treating it like that, and they'll be primed to go. And if it's a bit wet, I think the score will be even bigger. Canada, New Zealand, I'll go for rugby unity, mate. So the best thing for rugby is for Canada to win. I think Canada, as we've spoken about, have done it pretty tough. And if they could get to a Rugby World Cup final for rugby in Canada, it might be the lift that ignites the men's game a bit more, gets a bit more funding into the game. I think it'd be great for rugby if Canada got to the final.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm with you as well. Interestingly, the Canadian coach, Kevin Rouet, sort of called upon his team to not be too Canadian this weekend, which obviously means too polite about the way they go about their business. But they're an exciting team to watch, and they've got great players. Tessier, the centre, is a great player. That's Sophie De Goody, who's in the second row, a lock, really outstanding player. Georgia Miller out of the New Zealand team, injured, which interesting. It's an omission. So anyway, I'm with you, Eddie Jones. I think it'd be a great thing for the game if Canada could win. So, and I just think England will be far too good for a youngish French team, and I just think that they'll kick to the corners and they'll just work them into the ground and they'll just grind and grind and grind, and they will put together a pretty handy score. So anyway, it's great that the women's game is moving in this direction, and World Rugby overnight has announced a new competition for next year, the World XV Series or World 15 Series. The top 12 teams will play home and away in a cross-regional tournament between September and October. So that's Australia, Canada, England, France, Italy, Ireland, Japan, New Zealand, Scotland, South Africa, USA and Wales. So over that September-October period, they will play a tournament, which is fantastic. So people will be able to watch it on a regular basis. You'll see the teams play against each other. And you will find out who is the best team in the world each year outside of the Rugby World Cups. And then the following teams in the same window, they will only play at one venue, but Brazil, Fiji, Hong Kong, China, the Netherlands, Samoa and Spain will come together and play against each other, but only at one venue. It's a sort of cost-saving mechanism as well. But at least that's a step forward. There is a new competition and there is an opportunity for the personalities and the people and the excitement that's been generated out of this Rugby World Cup in England to be able to be repeated on an annual basis from here on in. So more structure, more investment and more opportunity for the women to play against the best competition at the world more regularly. And we know exactly what that does when they get those opportunities. So well done to World Rugby on that. More news to come in a couple of weeks' time. Someone did ask me about when is that strategic plan coming. I can confirm it will come. It will come after the council meeting, which is going to take place in the week after the Women's Rugby World Cup. So we're going to get the detail. We're going to get the detail about the $250 million that's going to be spent in North America. Not sure how that's going to be spent, where it's going to be spent. And it comes at a time when there are some significant challenges in North American rugby. The MLR has lost another team. The Houston Sabercats are now no longer. So we're now down to 7 teams. And there's speculation that the Canadians will be categorised as international players into the MLR next year. And there's also speculation that there will be a limit of 5 international players each match day 23. So there's some challenges in North America at the moment. And also the South American look like the seed funding that's been put in place by World Rugby to get Super Rugby Americas up and running. Looks like it's run its course, and there's speculation that that funding won't be continued. Again, speculation at this time, but that will all be revealed when we see this strategic plan in a couple of weeks' time, and certainly looking forward to talking to Brett Robinson about some of the choices that have had to be made by World Rugby. So anyway, that's all ahead of us. But
Pemby, on that topic,
yes,
what is the World Rugby budget? How much money have they got to spend?
I don't know.
It's interesting to know because we talk about 250 here. Now you've got this World 15 tournament, so that's obviously going to take some significant funding. I'm just interested to know what their budget is. Like, what have they got to spend every year? Because then that will make it easier for us to do the sums about what's left over to do anything else.
I'm sure that'll be in the strategic plan.
Okay,
I'm sure that'll be in the strategic. But no, it's a very good question. But the point being is, and obviously clearly about why we have started this podcast is that it has a very simple mission. It's all about how do we help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And there's a simple formula that follows that, which is you need more people in more countries caring more about the game of rugby. So, and that will ultimately lead to more money into the game. But the current business model just doesn't work. You can't have every year, basically you're walking into a casino and putting all the money on Red 25 at the World Cup and hoping that that's going to come up. Because you think back to 2000, you think back to 2019, the Rugby World Cup in Japan, which was an incredible event. If that had taken place a few months later and COVID had arrived, can you imagine the disaster, the financial disaster, when we're all sitting here going, okay, World Rugby, with our begging bowls every year, we need more money from World Rugby. There's got to be a it begins at community game, semi-professional, professional, national. There's got to be different ways that we all can generate more money, and it's also not just the unions themselves. Rugby fans have got to take responsibility for the future prosperity of the game as well. It's not just the governing bodies. People have got to take action and behave in a way that's bringing more revenue into the game, because that's the big challenge at the moment. Eddie Jones in earlier edition of Rugby Unity spoke of a really productive and positive tournament that was played in Asia that just got canned because World Rugby didn't have the money. So we can't. The absolute potential of our sport is enormous given the coverage that we have. 500 million fans around the world. The game is played in 133 countries. There are millions upon millions, 11 million players around the world. There's a huge amount of potential, but we're still so far from realising
that's the funding
potential.
That's the funding side of it. But we've got to keep. I guess our job is to keep looking at how the game's played, because that's the number one frustration. When you just talk to people who aren't diehard fans, they just don't get how the game works. And we've obviously raised topics in the last period of time about where the confusion comes from, and some of the refereeing and some of the interpretation, trends on scrums, all those sorts of things. It's what the game looks like, and you've got to make it easy for the fans to grab hold of it and stick with it. So sorting that out at the same time, there's budgetary, but there's also what's it looking like, Is it something it's got to be entertainment. It has to be entertaining to a point to be able to attract people. So it can't be confusing.
Yeah. No, that's right. But there's also the commercialisation piece, which rugby does not do well.
No.
We're just not as sophisticated as we need to be to realise the revenue that we should be getting out of the game. We should be getting out of this massive spread of people. And when you watch that, that last 25 minutes of the Springboks playing the All Blacks last weekend, you would put that up against any sport anywhere in the world and say, is this not the best game in the world? When it's played at its best, it is a magnificent spectacle. It is edge of the seat, take your breath away, athletic performance. So anyway, we will.
I'm here.
No, but I think what we've got to do...
Well, I'll give you an example. I'm here in Victoria, obviously diehard AFL territory, and on the radio, which is the Triple M, during the day, the hosts were talking about going to the game. It was the Lions game, and how exciting that was. But they're obviously one of the major AFL broadcast radio stations, and they broadcast every game live. Every time you turn the radio on, they're broadcasting a game. But they were sitting there talking about the experience of sitting in the crowd in the Lions test there in Melbourne. So you can break through, but it's tough, But we've got to grab those moments. So you're right, the commercialisation of it and trying to optimise that is crucial.
Yeah. Before we jump on to any thoughts on that, Eddie Jones, before we start talking about Pacific Nations Cup?
Yeah, I think the game's got to be more attractive, mate. I think, as Ewen said, and how do you make the game more attractive? Like, people come to the games, and we're not talking about international rugby. Like, your little spiel there almost endorsed the 360 proposal, because what they're saying is true. International rugby is massively popular and successful. Like, no one debates that, but the problem is the second tier, and if you look domestically in Australia, if you just have a look where Super Rugby has gone and NRL and AFL have gone in the last 20 years, that gives you a little snapshot of the problem of rugby. That the domestic competition, and when I'm saying that, is Super Rugby, has not become attractive to those swinging voters. The diehards will still go and watch them. At the Brumbies, we know from experience, it wouldn't matter how bad you're going, how bad the weather was, there'd be 6,000 or 7,000 there, and they're always going to be there. But to get the 20,000s, the game's got to be attractive, and obviously winning's part of it in certain areas, but the game's got to be attractive. So how do you make the game more attractive? And that's the difficult thing for rugby, because at times it can be not very attractive, It cannot be very attractive. And so how do you get that balance right? So to me, it's all about the game. It's all about commercialisation. It's all about how do you make the game more attractive. And all those things come on the back of that. Sure, they can run it better as a business, but I don't have any real idea of how to do that.
No. That's true. I do know that. But anyway, okay. The Super Rugby thing, we could talk about that. Why has Super Rugby lost its way? Well, that's a 3-hour program, and actually we could probably talk for days about that. But I think the URC is showing promising signs. I think the Premiership is showing promising signs.
That's debatable. That's debatable. URC.
Well,
you just talk to anyone in South Africa. They won't be saying that.
Well, I'm not saying the problems.
The only team to get crowds in regularly in URC in South Africa is the Stormers. And again, Cape Town, they've probably got a massive rugby supporters of 20,000. They come to every game.
Yeah. Anyway, let's not get onto that. We can talk about that at another time, and we will talk about R360. And I jumped onto their website the other day, and I put a little note in there saying, "Hi, introduce myself. You know who I am. How about you come on the show and tell us what you're up to?" And I did notice the other day, Mike Tyndall, there was a video that went out to these players who have signed letters of intent, and coaches and others to, it's all okay. We'll come back to you in a 12 months' time or whenever it's going to be next year once we get our permissions and other things. I did think it was a bit cute when they said, we'd like to tell you more, but because of World Rugby's processes, that we're now part of the World Rugby processes, we can't share it with you. I just would like more detail. I would like to know what they're talking about because it's all just speculation so far. So anyway, we'll leave R360 for another time because then we'll never get off today. But let's go to the Pacific Nations Cup. And I think this has been a great tournament for rugby. And I think we've brought some attention to it because often it just drifts away and it's not considered particularly attractive to too many people around the world, but it really has captured people's imaginations. And there are some important matches to be played this weekend. Samoa, Chile in the World Cup qualifier. That gets going this weekend. Tonga plays Canada in the playoff match, but it's the big game between Japan and Fiji in Salt Lake City, Utah, which is going to capture the imagination. And Eddie Jones, take us through your week in preparing for what is an important match, because when rugby players play matches, they like to win competitions. They like to win trophies. So there's a lot on the line. It's an important match. How has your week been?
Well, again, for us, going back on the discussions we had about the semi-final for the women's, we've got a particularly young team. Most of them haven't experienced finals. Most of them haven't lost a final, and most of them haven't won a final. So new experience for them. We played on Sunday. You travelled to Salt Lake City on Monday. Traveling domestically in America's like you walk in Denver Airport, and it's like you walk for those in the eastern suburbs, you walk from Maroubra to Bondi to get to your gate. Like you just keep going and going. Shit, we might as well walk there. So then you get on the plane that's pretty cramped, and you get off, you arrive there. So we arrived about 6 o'clock, and I'm not complaining. This is all part of the challenge. All I'm trying to give a picture. So we get to 6 o'clock, Salt Lake City. And as I said, American flags everywhere. It's a bit different. And then we had one really light training day because we're still sore from the game on the Tuesday, and then we had a reasonable hit out yesterday on Wednesday. We trained really well, and the attitude of the players is fantastic. So it's just, the nerves will start to really come in. We want to play slightly a different way, which I obviously won't discuss here, but we feel like we're prepared well and want to give it a red hot go. And we're a bit like Canada. We've got a free hit here. We can go for it because everyone expects Fiji to win. They're ranked 9th in the world. Most of their players play together for Fiji, drew up. So they're a cohesive team. They're well coached by Mick Byrne, who was spoken about. So we got a free hit. And we've had Canada in the hotel with us for the last 2 weeks, so we've got to know them pretty well. And you just think about, how tough that they do at Canada. Most of their players are semi-pro, and they're battling above their weight. So they got a big game against Tonga, who, I think have done really well in the tournament. Tonga, if you look at it over the last 8 years, have probably struggled to keep their position, and they've done really well in this tournament. And the last game, Samoa and Chile, Samoa's struggling to get players. Apparently they've called Christian Leofano into play, who'd retired. So, Link, I don't know whether you're going to be Samoan heritage. They might call you into it.
No.
to break up the scrum, mate. But that, that's...
We can add some kilos, that's about it.
And then Chile's one of the risers of world rugby, isn't it? They've been a fascinating story, done really well. But then Samoa's one of those traditional, powerhouses of world rugby. You think about, the impact that guys like Brian Lima have had at the World Cup, and how much joy they brought to people. We can't afford to lose Samoa. So all that $250 million that's going to the US, you'd want to make sure that there's some money still going to countries like Samoa and Tonga, and because they're important parts of our game, and they bring a difference to the game. That's what we like about it. They play differently. You play against them, you played against them. Like we know we played against Tonga. We got bruising.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The Chile team, have had that opportunity to play as Selknam in the Super Rugby Americas team. So they've played together regularly, and I imagine that will give them a significant advantage against Samoa, who don't get the opportunity to play together regularly in competition. Eddie Jones, just back to you and your team as a young team. What about the leadership in and around your team? This is an emerging team. You've put them together. There's 20 players, your more senior players who have not been available. How have you and the senior players gone about building sort of confidence and harnessing this enthusiasm of the youth at the same time as directing it towards high performance?
Yeah, well, high performance doesn't matter whether you're young or old or middle-aged. High performance is making sure you prepare well every day. So there's been no shortcuts in that area, but we've just sort of split it up into what we call a Japan First group, which look after the off-field issues. And there's certain things in Japan society that are really important. Punctuality, tidiness are important parts of Japanese society. So we've tried to make sure we keep that really strong. And then we've got another group, which is the tactical game day group that look after the game look after the preparation for the game, and that seems to be working really well. And we've got a young captain in Warner Dearns, and sometimes when you make a young guy captain, they can really take to it, or they can find it a burden, and he's taken to it. Enjoys the captaincy, doesn't overspeak. Economy of words, and has been leading by example. And I think he has the potential to be one of the best locks in the world, if not the best lock in the world. Consider he's only 23. He's hardly played any first-class rugby. That you see what he's doing on the international stage now. He's got a fantastic opportunity to lead Japan into a new era of success.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, so you and McKenzie, you're Mick Byrne and you're coaching against Eddie Jones. How have you prepared the Fijian team this week for this important title, this important championship? Because I think, people just have to understand that players and coaches play and coach to win. And they play and coach to win titles. It's at the end of your career, that's what you look towards. So this match this weekend is a championship. This matters. This is important. So you're Mick Byrne. You want to win. You're preparing this team. You've watched Eddie Jones's team play. How do you beat them? How do you blow them off the park? Knowing that, as Eddie Jones says, they've got a bit of a free hit there. No one expects that Japan's going to be able to beat them.
Well, I don't think. They'll do their homework, but I don't think they'll know all of the potential ways that Japan can play. I think what we have seen from Fiji and particularly with Mick involved over the last period of time is that they've played a more fundamental style of rugby. So in other words, rather than the la-di-da stuff that they were renowned for, they've actually concentrated on the basics. So, which is obviously winning possession and being able to get across the advantage line and using their muscle. So they've got ability, 5-10 metres out. They've got the capacity to be able to bludgeon their way across the line. We saw that against the Wallabies a few years back. They've got that ability, so they can play a fairly simple game that's attritional. And so I think that with Japan being a younger side, they'll be thinking that they can put pressure on them that way and maybe physically dominate them in the forwards. But I've been looking at the Japan side and I agree with what he says. I love the second row. They've got key players in key positions, number 8, the fullback, who are all very capable of actually constructing and making things happen. So I think Mick will be a bit worried. I'd be worried if I was him because I don't quite know how Japan's going to come at me. I know that they'll have really good set plays, particularly from lineouts and things like that. So, and the tempo of the game is something that Japan's very good at changing. So it's difficult. They want to control possession. And I think if I was them, I'd want to be playing at the right end of the field because then you can bring the physicality and that to bear. And if they get over the line a couple of times from 10 metres out and it's not that attractive, they won't care. It's just about getting the win. So that's what I think. I don't think it'll be flashy from Fiji. I think it'll be more industrial style of football that allows them to use their big bodies and try and wear the Japanese team out.
Okay. Can Eddie Jones summon up a victory over Fiji, or are they going to be too strong for Japan?
No, I don't. I've seen enough of the Japanese, the variety in the Japanese game that I can see that they've got well organised plays, moves, and different ways of playing that will challenge the Fijian approach. I mean, one of the things it's whoever's got the ball. So you obviously want, if you got the ball, then you're in control of the game. So I'd imagine if I was in the Japanese side, I'd be trying to hang on to the ball and control the tempo of the game. And they have the ability to play different tempos. So if you hang on to the ball, it gets a bit frustrating from a defensive point of view. And I think that would be a real opportunity for Japan, is to try and frustrate the Fijian team by controlling possession and seeing what happens. But I think set piece will count. I think the set piece will cancel. I don't think there's any. I don't think there'll be an advantage there. Maybe Japan can put some pressure on the Fijian lineout, but scrum, Japanese scrum's been good. It's not heavyweight, but it's been really good, really effective. So there might be some surprises there. I think if fatigue becomes part of the game, that'll be. I think that'll work in Japan's favour.
So, Eddie Jones, just drawing a line through what Ewen McKenzie said earlier about that 91 Wallabies performance in the semi-final at the Rugby World Cup, where they had that cracking week of preparation where it was all on the line and then they were able to take that onto the field. Certainly it's been part of your mantra for the last, 30-odd years that we've been working together, talking about let's train well to play well. Have you had a week of training that gives you that confidence? You've obviously had a lighter week, but are you confident that you've had that quality of training to produce a championship winning performance?
Oh, we'll be ready. But we're going to have to play above ourselves. We're going to have to play above ourselves and bring Fiji down. That's the reality. And that's all right, because that's what finals are about. You go back to semi-final, Canada, New Zealand, in the women's, France, England. There's always one favoured team and one unfavoured team. The challenge of the unfavoured team is to play above themselves, put enough pressure on the favoured team to bring them down, and that's how you get upsets in finals. That's the great thing about finals rugby, and everyone knows there's a consequence involved in it, so it makes that sort of intricate equation even more interesting. Yeah, and that's why you coach and you play. Yeah. That's why, as a player, you love to play in those games. Yeah, you were either favourite or you weren't favourite, and you had to find a way to win. Like both of them are as challenging as Ewen alluded to. Yeah, and this is it's never fun thinking about the result, but the process to that is the best part of rugby. It is the best part of rugby. Like the other night, I was up at 1:30. Seriously, I was that excited about the game.
Yeah,
it's good.
Sorry, who was excited?
You feel that way.
You were excited, did you say, or somebody else was excited?
No, I was excited. I'm still excited, mate. I reckon it's just set up brilliantly. And you go there, all you can do is your absolute best, prepare as you will, and then give it a go and hope the players feel that way, because on the way to the bus, some players can start thinking, Ewan was saying, Ewan was one of the most commonsensical players, and I'm sure he was joking a bit. But players do think, oh shit, I forgot to pack my bag, or remember Joe Roth? If he didn't have his earphones, he used to be a mess, and he was one of the most brilliant players in the world. So all of that can happen, or they get a phone call from their girlfriend, I don't want to see anymore, you're way too much, or their wife's unhappy. All that thing can play a part, and you don't control that, and they get to the game and they're not quite right, and you don't know what.
You see it, they all rush. You get off the bus and they all rush off to the ticket booth because they're trying to leave tickets for their girlfriend's brother or something like that. Like that's what it's like. And so they're worried about getting the tickets to the right person so that some distant relative can get into the game and like it's sort of like that. But you got to remember, like Japan beat South Africa in the World Cup. Like, you know what I mean? Like that, and Eddie's right. And that's the bit that people say to me, do you want to coach again? No, I don't. But I do miss the strategy, the implementation of strategy, and trying to, and that moment where you can do something that people don't think is possible, and you win something that people didn't expect you to win. Or where we beat Crusaders in 2011, and I'd lost the Crusaders in the finals 4 times, and eventually we beat them. So you got to get excited by that, but you always got the dread of, it's the 5th time I've lost to the Crusaders in a final, in Super Rugby. So you look forward to those moments, and that's why I always want to play the good teams, because you want to see if you can be better, across 80 minutes. And that's the excitement of it. And Eddie's right. You do hope that the players have the same excitement, that they're not distracted by something else. I'll be looking for their haircuts and things like that. Don't worry, in the women's and men's, don't worry. I'm always looking for the haircuts. But it's, it is a great... And what about this? I mean, if you said to me 10 years ago or 20 years ago that Japan would be playing Fiji in Salt Lake City in a final, you wouldn't think that's possible. And that's the bit for me. You talk about marketing, commercial. That's the bit for me. If you're selling the game to kids and stuff like that, you say, well, here's your chance to travel the world and do things that are really interesting. It's just being in that environment, like Eddie's talking about. Yeah. And that's where the money, when you talk about money, and you got to travel economy and stuff, you got to spread the money and make it go as far as possible. Everyone thinks that being a professional rugby player means you can travel business class, and that's the mistake that we've made. We've got everyone conditioned to think that they're going to do that, but we need to change that, man, and get back to the idea that we don't want to waste money on business class air. We want to actually spend money on providing high performance environments and whatever, and spreading the money further across. And that's where I think that's the real experience. As Eddie said, walking miles in the airport, that's stuff you remember, because it's bizarre, but it's part of the experience, and you got to make that part of that's not a reason to lose the game. And a lot of teams will find reasons. They go and look for ways to say, we lost the game because something didn't turn up or whatever. No, you got to make it about the performance on the field. But all of the rest of it is the experience of being involved in rugby at that level, and getting to travel the world and stuff like that. That's the stuff that other sports can't offer. That they can't offer it, So I haven't been to Salt Lake City, but that'd be great to be able to go there and see 2 really good rugby teams play. How good's that?
Yeah. No, and a great day of rugby. The matches leading up to it.
I just had to remember that Reds Crusaders game, and my most vivid memory is early in the game. particularly Will Genya playing a lot of good short side plays. And it seemed like that was a bit of a strategy for the Reds. Was that the case, Nick? You can give it away now.
We play short. We played short side all the time against the Blues and whatever. Yeah. Against the Chiefs, you play short side.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So, but you have to overcome adversity in those games, just selections and stuff, because everyone thinks you've always got your best team. You never do. You've always got injuries you've got to cover. We had to cover injuries and that. Greg Holmes had to cover tight end prop because Slipper didn't play. In the World Cup in 91, Tim Gavin was the number 8, but he didn't play in those tournaments, Troy Coker did. People don't remember things like that. He was the pinch hitter that came in and covered for Tim Gavin and did a great job. We won that. And so you never have all the best players you want. So you've got to be able to adapt and get on with it, and that's where the squads are really important.
It is great fun. It is so much fun, and I certainly do miss it as well at times, when you're not part of that. But brilliant stadium there in Salt Lake City, a big day. All the very best of luck to Eddie Jones and the Japanese team, but also to Mick Byrne and the Fijian team. Fabulous there. Now, listen, boys, before we go, there's a couple of questions, but we'll just get to one from Omni Robert. He asks, hey, Pemby, thanks for the show. Wanted to get Eddie and Ewan's opinion on the age profile of the box players. Mostert, Khaleesi, Etzebeth, LaRue, Bongi are all close to their mid-30s. At what point do you cull older players and freshen up the team? Now, we have discussed this, but just a short answer, Ewen McKenzie, as to how do you go about culling older players to freshen up the team?
Well, I think it's not driven by the age specifically. You've got to look at how long the player's been playing at that level. South Africa tends to bring their players on in the forwards a bit later than other countries do. So, but you've always got to be looking for the next guy. It's not necessarily dictated by the guy that's there. You've always got to be looking at what's behind and making sure that player doesn't get lost to club rugby in France and suddenly is playing for France or some other country. So you've got to be keeping one eye, and you've got to bring those players through when they're ready. So it's not just about getting rid of someone. It's about actually making sure you can bring someone through. You're not blocking the pathway of the next best talent. So I don't think it's age driven. It's more about injuries, accumulation of injuries and things like that. So that can happen earlier. It can happen when you're 30. Doesn't matter if you're 35 or 30. So there's a bunch of other factors there, but you've always got to be looking at your pathways and making sure you're not blocking or losing players off to other opportunities. And we're in Australia acutely aware of that because there's other codes hovering around here. It's not about them going overseas so much, it's about there's other codes here. So you're into that space early, and we'll always play a younger team, have younger players on the field than South Africa because we've got more competition for the players at an earlier age. So I don't think you've got to be looking at it from both ends. You can't just look at it and say, oh, he's 35, so he's past it. It doesn't work like that. You've got to make sure you've got people coming through. And Rassie's been doing that. He's doing a good job,
Eddie Jones, a final word about that from you?
Just a couple of things. I agree with what Ewan says. And secondly, Omni probably works on a farm if he's culling people. Or culling cattle. To me, it's how much desire they got. Like, they want to keep going. Their body's still good. So you look at how good their body is. Can their body still do it? And some players age quickly and some players don't. And it's different for every player. And particularly for the tight forwards, like, it's how are they willing to go to the well? Are they willing to do all the hard work? Scrum hard, practice hard, keep doing it, not take shortcuts, and that's the eye of the coaching staff to look at that, because they all tell you they want to go. They'll all be saying now, no, Rusty, I want to go to the World Cup. I want to do it. They'll all be telling you that. No one ever says anything else. But you just got to look at them carefully, observe them carefully. Like, there's that great quote from Pep who says, watching a player for 5 minutes of training is more valuable than watching a player in a game. And he's so true.
That is true. Yeah,
right.
100%.
Very good. All right. Well, listen, we're up against time, so thanks again. And Kieran, who has sent through a number of questions via email, we will get to those in the weeks ahead. Just some other news. The South African Rugby Union has announced that there's going to be a professional women's competition next year in South Africa, and it looks like it will be 6 teams. So fantastic news there again for the women's game, that there will be another women's tournament. And other news, it looks like Bath, after many years, that the stadium will finally be built at the rec ground. Not quite there. The approvals aren't quite through. They've got to get the Secretary of State, I think it is, who's got to give that final approval. But that majestic setting will become a permanent site for rugby union. And I was there earlier this year, and it takes your breath away, that place. And it's a wonderful ground. So the Meccano set can be packed away. They can put a proper stadium there, and we can all enjoy rugby there for many years to come. So that's a bit of a wrap-up of the news. So a big thanks again to Eddie Jones in a very busy week, and best of luck to him and the Japanese team in the final of the Pacific Nations Cup. A big thanks to you, Ewen McKenzie. We'll let you get back to Ella, and anything else that's happening down on the... Have you named any other of your animals?
They've all got different names. Not after rugby.
Have they? Any other rugby names?
No other rugby names. No. No.
Is there a cranky one there, a little cranky one that you've called Eddie?
No, there's no Eddie, but I'll bear that in mind. There's a few other, there's a few external.
Barks at you.
You've given me ideas now. I'll go and look, and I'll take a photo for you. I'll find something.
One that stays up 18 hours, like 20 hours a day.
No, I've got
is always at it.
I've got a galah, so maybe there's a galah that's got similar personality, so maybe that might count.
Anyway, all right, boys, thank you. And listen, people, for those of you on YouTube, please go to those hype points if you could. Just locate them. And you're saying it's great, and we're really pleased. And thank you so much for all of the support across TikTok, across Facebook, across the whole platform is absolutely blowing up. But if you could hit those hype points as many times as you possibly can, what that will do is help us to be found. And as I've mentioned a few times before, we are a startup, and we are trying to work through understanding how we can turn this into something sustainable over time. And the way that we'll do that particularly is by building an audience, and that means finding more people, and that's why the hype points on YouTube are so important. So anyway, a big thanks to you for coming back again. A big thanks to Eddie and Ewen as always. And please just remember, be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.